So hello guys, it's happy to be here. I'm kind of thrilled. Basically, I will share today some of the things that I've been doing as my masters. I think I need a thing for switching the slides, but probably I'll get it later, I guess. And the update is basically that I'm not at Data Mars machine learning engineer anymore. So basically, I'm master's candidate at the, at the Faculty of Sciences at the University of Novi Sad. And basically, I'm doing as independent neurocomputational deep learning researcher. So basically, I investigate how our brain works and how we can combine the knowledge that we get from our brains into deep learning domain. So everyone who saw the Matrix movie knows the dilemma about the spoon. Is there a spoon or not? Or basically, is it just inside of our minds? So if you had seen the movie, if you don't, please watch it. Basically, the general idea is, can we decode what our brain gets inside? So all the signals that we have inside our brains, could we basically recreate any sort of content outside from our heads? We know the semantics inside of our minds, but can we get it out? And yeah, deep neural networks would be the way to go. And the idea is to extract the images that our brain sees. So from the applications point of view, we could kind of implement the assistive communication from the people who are for the people who are disabled, etc., etc. So we could also create some sort of pipelines for neurorehabilitation, and also we could decode the images and then create the signals to further stimulate people who have either Parkinson's, Alzheimer, and different type of disease and neural problems. So we could also go creative and dream decode. Yeah. And why would we even decode vision? Because it would kind of reveal what happens inside of our mind, inside of our brain. Because we kind of tend to know what we see, we tend to know what we can agree upon, what we communicate as a species one to another. So we don't understand, like, to the point of completely our own attention and perception. So also there's a phantasma problem, also people who cannot visualize things. So how does their brain works? That is also something that could be nice to investigate. And also a hot topic and a new area I invite you to explore and to see further research is brain-computer interfaces. People are doing amazing stuff. People are creating stuff to neurostimulate brains. And basically patients are recovering from stroke much, much faster. And a lot of things around the globe are doing that and creating new cool communities. So we're going to go to neuroscience for the first part. We're going to talk about the eye. Look, how does our eye work? We have the basic optic parts. We have cornea, which is doing the first refracting of light of the photons. And then we have the optic lens that focuses the photons further and further more. And then we go to the epic retina, which is basically doing a turning of the photons that goes into eye into electrical signals, and then it goes to one of the cranial nerves, which is the optic nerve. So we kind of get the light, and then we turn it into electrical signals. So we are receiving, refracting, and transforming this. And yeah, along the way, as we go further from the cranial nerve and the optic nerve, we go to which is basically made of a lot of ganglion cells. And we use inside of our brain and along the visual pathways, we use something that we call retinotopic structures. So basically, as you have in CNNs, in VGG, and different type of architectures, we distract feature maps. That is also being inspired, or that was inspired by how our brain works. We have a lot of cells, and each level of our cells in our brain are extracting different type of features in different complexities. So we have these retinotopic structures, and then it goes basically to our lateral geniculate nucleus. And LGN kind of acts as filters towards what we got in the first place, and it uses basically, yeah, we're going to go to visual cortex. And yeah, LGN has 6 layers. I'm going to talk about why they're important. But the end of the signal, electrical signal, is our visual cortex. And it's back inside of our skull in the occipital lobe. So most important part is basically our primary visual cortex, and it focuses mostly on the center of our attention, and it doesn't concern a lot of our peripheral vision. So most important thing is the central part of image that we are looking at. Our eye and our optic lens are inverting image, so at the first step in our eye, we don't see what we see outside, so it's already inverted. So our mind is kind of a constructing picture from something that is already imagined, not real. And then from basically what we have here is we have a lot of different column structures, and it's millions of neuronal vertical columns that are kind of intertwined and connected, and each column has a different type of function. So each kind of acts as a filter of its own. And then you can imagine that as farther and as deeper as we go in the structure of visual cortex, we get more finer and finer features. So it kind of acts as a CNN, as I mentioned. It was inspired by our brain and by how our visual pathways work. So the deeper we go, the more finer characteristics we have, and also what has inspired is these on-off receptive fields. And you can see the LGN that we mentioned. It has like a simple type of filter. It has a circular type of filter, and if we detect light in the center, then around we expect to be dark. So if we detect that type of structure, it could kind of, as we could compare it to pixel detection. And as we go further, we get to these simple and complex cells. Simple cells, as you can see, is rectangular in shape. They kind of don't detect that much of density among the picture, like of the pixels that we see. And then as we go further and further, we get to more complex cells that kind of connect all the dots in the previous layers, and then create more meaningful image or a feature space. So why EEG? I'm going to try to be fast. It's reliable, it's kind of attainable, we can buy, it's affordable, it's portable, and it's non-invasive. So basically now you can buy an EEG device like for thousands of euros, maybe even less if you go to Temo, I guess, maybe. But the most important thing is that it gives us a new insight into brain's neural dynamics, and we can kind of see how do we compare the deep learning frameworks to dynamics of our own brain, and can we do something with these multi-model approaches. What did we do? So actually, one thing that I've done in my master's thesis is the classification of the EEG signal. So what happened is that we got the data set called TOTVs, which uses the emotive epoch EEG type of device. It was the whole study has been done on 23 subjects. It has been used the granular time division of 128 hertz. That means the signal for 1 second was divided into 128 frames, and then feature space was created using the 14 channels, and each of the channels would have like 32 segments, like a quarter of a second. So the length of the window, yeah, was 32. The interesting part that we also had was 3 different subsets. One was done with digits, one was done with the characters, specific ones that are listed there, and the third problem, or the third subset, was being analyzed and being classified, was being done on objects, like different type of objects. So that's kind of the construction of the data set. So some of the approaches that are being used in the classifications are CNNs, LSTMs, like recurrent neural networks, of course, and now more and more we are going to use the attention mechanisms, which is being used in transformer networks. Why is that? Because we try to see if there is more and more like sequent dependence in the signal and in the feature space. So yeah, these are the architectures that I mentioned. One of the approaches also is just to use transformers encoder, like use one part of the architecture and see how we can classify signals by doing that, like don't go deeper into details. We don't want to use as complex architectures as we can, because we want to create or tackle the approach to use real-time BCI systems. And imagine if you have an EEG cap on your head, you wouldn't want to have a delay while trying to detect if there's a seizure for people who have epilepsy. So if the seizure is going to come, you want to see it in real time. You don't want to see it afterwards. So that's the importance of using just the right amount of complexity for the network's architectures. So 3 approaches that are mentionable, worth mentioning, is to use basically just, I don't know if you can see it, but the first column on the left is just being focused on convolutions. Convolutions, pooling layers, nothing special there. But the good thing that we can see in the papers and in our work is that the convolutional neural nets are working well. So there is not as much time or basically temporal dependency that can exclude the spatial dependency. So why is this important? Probably because our brain works as fast and it clears the context of the previous thoughts when you change this picture. So probably if you would be looking at 2 different pictures, the association part would only last for a while. Brain would be fast in switching context towards a second scene or something else that is looking at. So the middle one is a combination best of both worlds, basically. So convolutional neural nets that would be focusing on spatio-temporal connections in the signals. So try to detect the patterns that are related to the channels and also to the time. And it would extract some of the features, whether LSTM would use its recurrent power to try and detect all the sequential dependency in the signal being previously extracted. So those are basically how I can kind of rank the results. So on the left, it's the least efficient from these 3. The middle one was basically the second place. And the best of those was basically double GRU and double LSTM network. I didn't expect this to work better than the middle one, but it seems that if we use gated recurrent unit as the first 2 kind of components in our architecture, it seems that its speed and a little bit less complexity, because it uses one gate less than LSTM, it produces just the right amount of feature space, of size of feature space for further LSTM to be good at creating a meaningful distinction in the signals. So how was the results? Yeah, comparing to the works that are basically using a little bit of similar architectures and on the same data set, of course, I'm happy to share that our work outperformed at the digits subset. So it was almost, yeah, it was, I don't know, 0.3 better than a competition from 2021, even though they did use a bit more complex structure. What is also interesting is that we had a higher classification accuracy on the objects, and it was the lowest on the characters. There's an assumption why is that, is because when we think of objects, there is just more precise semantics in our brain, and the signal is much more clear. And whether we think about more abstract concepts as our digits and the characters, our brain creates signals that are less distinguishable. So it makes sense that we are better at recognizing objects and making distinction among them than between letters and digits. So that would kind of create a little bit of difference in the works, related works results, and in our work result. So I want to talk a little bit about generative approaches, because this is just the first part of pipeline. We have to have a way to classify a signal, to kind of create a latent space for it to be used further, and how could we actually generate the image out of it. And today we're going to talk about 3 different approaches. We're going to go briefly through their architectures. We're going to look at their results. So we're going to see what people are doing and how did they do that. And one of them is ThoughtViz, which is basically the baseline paper that went out 2018, I think. And they showed that there is a possibility to use this type of approach, like to use classification pipeline at the start to create a feature space that could be used in image generation architecture further. Then we're going to go to dream diffusion, which is, as the name would say, it uses diffusion. It uses stable diffusion to create basically images based on EEG embeddings that we have fed it to. And EEG style gun ADA, basically, it uses EEG signals to impose a different type of style towards the images that are being used in the feature space. So thought these basically, we have the EEG signal, and it, of course, goes to encoder. We want to create something that is usable to our generator, and we want to feed it to. So how do we do that? We create also a class at the end. It's also we use it for our ground truth information, and then we feed it to generator. Also, what we add some noise, because we want generator to be able to improve and to have kind of a noisy signal at the beginning, and then go further and further to create some fake images that discriminator could not basically detect well at the end. So we want to trick it. It's standard GAN architecture, like generative adversarial network architecture. And yeah, this is basically it, what we have. We use that classifier that we have. In their work, they use the VGG16 in their work as a classifier of images. And yeah, a discriminator was being trained as their pipeline. The other one, dream diffusion, the EEG signal is being also turned into latent space. So they have their own EEG encoder. It's kind of a clip-like. The idea is, as we use images and clip encoder to turn the images into some sort of different feature space signal, we do the same with EEG, and also we use masks to know, they use masks to know which part of signal belongs to which labels. So if they're doing with objects, I don't know, chair, display, or a lamp, or a, I don't know, whatever it could be, table, they know which part of signal is connected to it, and it's being kind of split and masked. The lower part, as you can see, is just the standard stable diffusion architecture being used, and then they pair the images and what is being created by a stable diffusion with the signal, the latent signal from EEG. So that is kind of created into that is being basically used for the EEG decoder to create another image, and at the end of the process. Of course, they use a cosine similarity to compare embeddings and to see how well the in-clip image encoder did. The third one, they have been doing something, basically most of the things on their own. So they used two different approaches to convert EEG signals. They stacked 4 LSTMs to create a 128-dimensional feature space for the like latent variables for EEG. They also did the same with CNNs as encoder, like basically they reduced it to the 128 feature space. And then kind of they use that and feed it with noise to the generator. So what was in between generator and discriminator is their ADA, which is basically adaptive domain alignment, which would add some sort of style to the image that is being generated. So it was not just generated image and then fed to the discriminator. It is being basically modified by some sort of style which is being extracted from the EEG signal. So basically, then we kind of have the similar pipeline as they have in most of the works. Like we have image encoder and we have a generator that works with it. So we're going to go to results. Dot these results. You can see the 10 classes that we mentioned. Basically, the first 9 columns are what the model got, And the 10th, the most right column, is basically the ground truth. So as you can see, even Thought Quiz in 2018 was not as bad as you would expect on this type of difficult task. Dream diffusion, these are all generated images. So you can see that Jack-o'-lantern is not that bad, but also not great. Yeah, I can say not great, not terrible. Panda can be kind of an abomination at some points. But also, yeah, you can see that there's a plane on the left. Like, those are kind of easy to distinct. This is kind of a more tricky with EEG style gun ADA, because imposing the style and everything creates a lot of noise inside the whole pipeline, and then basically the whole GAN structure does not perform that well. As you can see, there are a lot of things that we do not know, like what is on it. Whether on some other more simpler one, they look like the flower is easy, the panda is easy, but some of other things are not easily distinguishable what are on the picture. So if you would want to kind of know what's next, I guess one of the approaches is to use some more attention-based algorithms in the whole like transformer. Like we have vision transformer now, the whole transformer pipeline and the architecture, and then basically get the richer latent representations. Also, we need to get better data sets. So having a good data set is most important thing, as in most of the problems that we have in our domain. So we need to do more research. We need to do more kind of a survey. We need to have more subjects that will do this kind of stuff. Probably shave their heads and use the EEG. I'm kidding, not. Yeah, and the good thing is we could develop at one point real-time loops and systems to have neurofeedback from users and basically create some sort of art. I don't know, like we can draw by our image, we can change things. Some people are playing games by using their EEG signals and caps. So from my point where I'm standing, I'm looking forward into neurorehabilitation, helping people live better lives. Like, how do we use this type of approach and this type of research to help people recover faster from sickness, from stroke and whatnot, and possibly create some non-invasive method for healing people. And yeah, basically that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, let's have some questions. The first one we got on the app: was M&E library enough for data pre-processing and noise reduction, or would you recommend anything else?
Can you just start?
Was M&E library enough for data pre-processing?
In our case, it was enough. Yeah, for our data set, it was enough. So yeah, thanks for the question.
Any questions from the audience?
One more question.
Here, sorry.
Hi, thank you for the interesting talk. I have two questions. So one is, you showed how the different channels from the EEG are placed over the head.
Yeah.
Are all these channels informative and important for reconstructing the image, or can you do that with just a subset of the channels? And also my question is, how well do these models generalize between different people? I don't know how the data sets are collected, but would you have to fine-tune it to do prediction on another person's head, or do they generalize well? Like, would they work out of the box?
Both questions are great. I'm going to go with the first one. So one of the approaches was to use PCA to kind of reduce the number of channels, and it turned out that all of the channels are equally, not equally, but informative. So we got less accuracy when we reduced the number of channels, and I didn't expect it. I was expecting it to some part of like temporal lobe or something like that, not to be as important as we saw the visual pathways, but they were all of kind of important.
That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And for the second question, could you repeat it, please?
Yeah, how well do models generalize to other people's
Yeah, it depends on the research. So if you would have like different age gap, different cultural gap, in this type of topics, it would need some fine tuning. And if you have like people from the similar age group or either like, I don't know, ethnicity or some cultural thing, it kind of shows the connection that then it works better.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Someone else? Come on.
Thank you for the great talk. I was wondering, you mentioned using this for medical applications. How do you imagine this research be applied to ill patients? Let's say Parkinson's disease. Do you plan to maybe like stimulate their brains in a way that it matches the healthy brain's EEG, or how is it imagined?
The idea is to get as many information that we can as how our brain works in normal cases, like in a healthy person, and then we could possibly use what we recreated in these images to go backwards, like to create a similar process, and then try to recreate the EEG signals that the healthy person has by showing the images. So it would kind of be the whole circle. So this is the first part of process. We can see how we detect or encode signals to images. Then we would probably use, or the idea is to use images to stimulate person into probably either delta state or some states, brain states that we wanted for improved healing process.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
So, microphone.
How about people who are colorblind for daltonism?
I believe that it would require a different data set. It would require a way to kind of connect the dots, because there's a young Helmholtz theory that we have 3-color system, like red, green, blue. So we have a different types of cones in our retina, and they detect kind of colors based on the wavelength. So it would be really informative for us to compare and basically use some sort of contrastive learning between the people who have daltonism and the healthy persons, and possibly see the differences. Then we can use those differences and add them as some sort of noise to kind of create something out of it. That could be one of the approaches, but it would require another set of kind of a research and survey, and basically do the same thing with persons who have daltonism. Thank you for the question. Anyone else?
Do you think that this technology should be limited in any way? Because there's a good chance of misuse. I mean, as a tool of a control or whatever. I mean, having something that is competitive to the human's eye, and if you connect it to a very big, I mean, like a good computer, not a good, but like a supercomputer, you can get a very strong controlling machine.
Yeah, that is true, and that's always a danger. So it would be up to us to use it to kind of a more ethical, I can say, approach, but basically be more moral in the use of it. We got electricity, and then we created also weapons out of it.
Electric chair to begin.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of parallels in human history, but I think that this community, like community of sciences, engineers, and thinkers, has to be the moral one in the future world. So we have to impose either algorithms or rule sets, something that it would be used to kind of better the humanity.